Good evening, everyone. Very, very special day for me today. Today is the birthday of my new name, Chaim Levi. It was exactly 1 year ago that Hashem made a big miracle for me. That every single day, every moment, Hashem is doing miracles for us. And sometimes it's begolui, sometimes it's not so begolui. Like we learned in the previous Maimah, Baruch Shas Anisim, that Ein Balanes Makeh B'Nisai, but I definitely am Makeh B'Nes and publicizing it, the bigness that Hashem did for me. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Sha'akolim Li B'Dvarei. L'chaim. Chaim Livracha. That a year ago, these nights, these days, were right about a week after I was hospitalized, and it was the most critical time. Like my children put it, you were at the edge of the cliff. And Nisim, the Eibishter had a special program for me, together with my wife, Sazan Gesund, Chaim Nitzchim, to be able to accomplish a lot, to give shiurim, to learn that I was Kuntres, all for what? L'schus, L'ilei Nishmas, Miriam Bas, Ephraim Za'ev, she should have Yedidus and Hashem Lamata B'kar of Mamish through the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Chaim. So we're now in the middle of a very, very special Maimer. I don't know if you're allowed to say the most on a Maimer. Everything is special and holy. But this is such a powerful Maimer because it gives us mamsh, it opens up our eyes in the days that we are in. The whole Maimer is about one akudah, that this is a time when we strengthen our emunah. And where do we get our emunah from? Who gives it to us? The Nasi Adar. Like the pasuk of the emunah, we learned that already before. We talked about it. There's Raya Mehemna, that the shepherd of the generation, the Moshe Rabbeinu B'Doiroi, Mordechai B'Doiroi, and same thing with every Moshe, is Pashtusa the Moshe B'Chol Dara V'Dara. That in every generation there's a Moshe Rabbeinu who's doing exactly what it says in the pasuk. V'ata Tetzaveh B'nei Yisrael, to connect Yidden to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This also reminds us, tonight is Chav Zayin Adar, and we remember very well what happened. Chav Zayin Adar Tavshin on Beis. Be'iker, we know that everything Hashem does is good. There's a purpose, although we are waiting to see it, the Gilui of its purpose. Or Chav Zayin Adar, the Rebbe gave us instructions earlier than that, a few weeks before, that Chassidim should be the mouthpiece for the Rebbe and spread Chassidus, which we're doing now. So just to give a general picture of what's going on in the Maimer, at least in short, to get like a skeleton, a structure. The Maimer is really divided up into three parts. We learned the first two parts, not finished yet. We'll soon finish the second part. The first part of the Maimer is explaining what's V'ata Tetzaveh B'nei Yisrael. That this pasuk, Pshuti Shal Mikra, is that it's talking about oil. But the way the Rebbe is explaining, V'ata Tetzaveh means you, Moshe, you should connect B'nai Yisrael to Oirein Seif Baruch Hu. How does he do it? So Rashi, the Rebbe says in the Maimer that he is the one who's zon u'mefranis eser emunah. He nourishes us with emunah, which is basically the same thing to connect us to Ein Sof. And that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in his Maimer, the Taich of Raya Mehemna, which simple meaning is a faithful shepherd, but a deeper meaning is that he's a shepherd of emunah. And at this point of the Maimer, in the first part of the Maimer, it brings out that what does he do? He feeds us emunah. What does it mean he feeds us? Everyone has it from birth. What it means is that it should be pnimius. Then the Rebbe brings the second inyan of what a Rebbe does. Part 2 of the Maimer is after he introduced the inyan from Mordechai HaTzadik. The Mordechai HaTzadik is the one who rallied Mesiras Nefesh by the Yidden and awakened by them their Yechidish B'Nefesh, the Etzema Nefesh, that they should have Mesiras Nefesh. And that brought about the conclusion of Matan Torah. Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim, kiblu ma'sheichelu la'asos. They completed Matan Torah through their Mesiras Nefesh. Who gave them the koyach for that? Mordechai HaTzadik in his generation. But the Rebbe wasn't satisfied just saying that. He said, what's about Moshe Rabbeinu? And the Rebbe said, since the Frierdiker Rebbe brings one after another about the Moshe Rabbeinu, and then he brings about Kosis Lamoid, that when the Yidden are in Tzaddus, and they're in Kosis, they're crushed. It brings them to the level of Moed of the Neshama. What does it mean, Moed of the Neshama? The highest level of the Neshama, Yechida, the Etzema Nefesh. This level of Kosis Lamoid was revealed in the time of Mordechai. Says the Rebbe, 1 minute. The Frierdiker Rebbe started with Moshe, went over to Mordechai. What's about Moshe? In Moshe's time, there was no Kosis Lamoid. The Yidden didn't reach Etzema Nefesh then. You can't say so, because since the Frierdiker Rebbe is bringing them in succession, one after another, when he talks about Moshe Rabbeinu, and then he brings about Kosis Lamoid, it must mean that also by Moshe it was Kosis Lamoid. So for that, the Rebbe is explaining what we learned last week and we're learning now. And then later we'll come to part 3 of the Maimer, which we're not doing right now. And Perek Tes starts the third part of the Maimer, which is really the big chiddush of the Rebbe, of what the taich of this pasuk is. So the first part of the Maimer teaches Ve'ata Tetzaveh as Bnei Yisrael, that you're going to connect Yidden with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Ein Sof. You're going to give them emunah. The second part is teaching 2 parts of the pasuk. Ve'ata Tetzaveh as Bnei Yisrael, and then Kosis Lamoid. What's the meaning? That's in from Mesiras Nefesh. The Yidden had that brought them to, because of their Kosis, they reached Lamoid. They reached that level of their neshama, which is called Lamoid, the Moed of the neshama, Yechidish B'Nefesh, the Etzema Nefesh. But the question remains: what's in time of Moshe Rabbeinu? There was no Kosis. How can you have Lamoid? So the Rebbe answered, and that's where we left off last time, that it's really every Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation has two functions, two things. One is V'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael, Kosis Lamoid, to get Yidden connected to their Etzem HaNefesh. And then there's another thing, which depends on the generation. The Chitzaynistic, so to speak, function of a Rebbe. The Chitzaynistic function of a Rebbe depends on the call of the hour. In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, did not need the Kosis Lamoyed in such a way. There was no Kosis going on. So they didn't need the Inyan from Mesidas Nefesh. Time of Mordechai, they needed Mesidas Nefesh. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? What was his Chitzaynistic, so to speak, function? His second function was to bring Das to the Yidden, to bring them to a level of internalizing Torah and mitzvahs. They should feel it. It should go into their bones. They should feel it all the way. But that's not the primary function. Every Rebbe, without exception, that's what we learned at the end of Perek Vav, that every Rebbe, without exception, has a primary function, which is to reveal the Yechidah Shebenefesh by Yidden, to bring Yidden to the Madrega of Lama'or. Even if it's in a generation that there's no Kasis, like by Moshe, it does not mean that there was no Lama'or. There was Lama'or, but without the Kasis. I remember Beis Truma, Tafshin Memches. Rabbi Marlow went by the Rebbe for dollars after the Rebbe said a sicha, which was a very, they say, like a scary sicha, talking about the future. The Rebbe very clearly, the way I understood, is hinting of Gimel Tammuz. The Rebbe is saying there are Rabbanim, and there's Goldstein, and there's... And afterwards, Rabbi Marlon went by and said to the Rebbe, a bracha that should be Va'ata Tetzaveh as Bnei Yisrael. And the Rebbe said, yeah, it should be. And he said, what we know the type of Kosis Lamoir, to bring Lamoir. And the Rebbe said, without the Kosis. That's, I'm talking from my memory. I didn't hear it for a long time, but I remember, I think the Rebbe saying, without the Kosis. In other words, every single Rebbe has one tzad hashava, equal to every Rebbe, that they work on the lamoyer of a yid, of their etzem hanefesh, to reveal it. Then there is a secondary function, says the Rebbe, which goes according to the generation. Moshe's time, it was avodah pnimis, it was lahamshech das. In Mordechai's times, it was Mesidas Nefesh. And in every generation, the Rebbe did according to the needs of their generation. But that's already a secondary level. But the Lamoir is by every Rebbe. To get a Yid to reach to Lamoir, which gives him the koyach to pass nisyonos till the extent even of Mesidas Nefesh, this is equal by every Rebbe. So, and this is how the Rebbe answers the Shaila that the Frierdiker Rebbe starts the Maimon about Moshe Rabbeinu, and then he says Kosis Lamoir was by Mordechai. The Rebbe says 1 minute. Since Kosis Lamoir was the Hamshach to Moshe Rabbeinu, we must say there was also Moir by Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Rebbe, yes. As a matter of fact, that's one of his two functions. In fact, it's the primary function of a Rebbe. So what do we see? until now, that in every generation, even though there is Pashtusa the Moshe, is that I am a Hemna, that's Mechazik the Emunah, that comes to every Yid. But then there is what the Rebbe said in Seif Vav, and this is a key word, like they say, the punchline. What does the Rebbe do? Raya umefarnes es Emunah atzma. What does it mean as Emunah atzma? Not that he's feeding the Yidden with Emunah. First of all, they have it by themselves. What does it mean as Emunah atzma? That he, so to speak, it's like shaking the Yechida, waking up the Ma'ira the Yechida, the Etzem HaNefesh, to give a hashpah to Chaya, to the Mazel, Sheba Neshama, in order to reach us, to reach the part of the Neshama that's in our body. Chaya, the Mazel Sheba Neshama, sees Elokus. And from seeing, it gives us a Hisaydus, a feeling of Emunah. We don't see Elokus, but we get the Emunah. As a result, the Chaya sees Elokus, and we feel the Emunah in Elokus. But who gives that extra boost of Chayas to Chaya? It comes from Yechida. And that's the function of the primary function of a Rebbe, going from Yechida, from Etzem HaNefesh, Geben HaTreisel, and it comes down, it drips down into Chaya, and then into our body, into the Nefesh Ruach Neshama, to bring into action that we should fill it with Pnimius. So that's a tight Zanus Umefanis as Emunah Atzma. He's feeding the Emunah of Yechida to Chaya. Because on the level of Chaya, we learned you could be Ganva Pur Machtarta, Rachmana Karye. A Ganav can be breaking into a house and he's crying to God for help. You believe in God or you don't. No, but then it's not B'Pnimius. What does Yechida do? Yechida has a much higher level of Emunah. Chaya, even though it sees Elikos, when you have an object that you're seeing, so there are two entities here. There's you and what you're seeing. So therefore, yeah, I see Elikos, but it doesn't mean I have to be Meisa Nefesh. I am me, you are you, and I'm excited about it, but not necessarily will it bring me to Mesidas Nefesh. Not saying no, but not necessarily. Masha'en came from Yechida. It's totally different. You know why? Yechida is that it doesn't see Elokus. It is Elokus. It is Elokus itself. It's Mitziusai is Elokus. So it's not someone believing in something else. It's Elokus, so he can't do otherwise. Like you have two people who are ready to give their life for a cause. One is La'avdul Guy. He wants to give his life. But he and the cause, what he's giving, are two separate things. When a Yid goes Al Kiddush Hashem, it's because the Yid can't go different. He can't do different because a Yid is Elokus. He can't turn himself away from himself. His whole Metzius is Elokus. That's why a Kal Shebekalim, says Alter Rebbe in Tanya, suddenly he's ready to go on Kiddush Hashem. I don't understand. You don't keep Torah mitzvahs, you don't keep Shabbos, Kashrus, nothing, and suddenly you're ready to go on Kiddush Hashem? You don't believe in him. So why are you giving your life? The belief is only mak if it's behelim. And when Yechida comes into the picture, that's a manefesh, that is megalit. So this is the function, the primary function of every Rebbe, is to be ma'ored the Yechida shebenefesh of every Yid. Then there's a secondary function, and that depends. Is it a generation of Kassis or not? Okay, so by Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't through Kassis, but there was Lamar, and by every generation. Now we're going to see another important difference between Rabbeim one to another. Amongst the Moshes of every generation, there were some Moshes who had a hashpah on all the Yidden, and some that had on a group, on a city or a country, but not on Klal Yisrael. They say that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came to America in 1929, the people were so impressed with him, with his presence, his panim, and everything. They begged him to come and settle in America. 1929, imagine, life would have been much easier. Especially he was then already starting to get not well, and could have had much better medical care. Here in America, they said, I'll have to answer you in writing. And for 6 years, the Frierdiker Rebbe was preparing the answer, thinking through the answer. And his answer basically was, I heard this in the name of Rabbi Buket. The Frierdiker Rebbe says, I'm not ready to be a Rebbe on the whole Klal Yisrael. I want to be a Rebbe on Chassidim, where I am. That's it. But not on Klal Yisrael. When he came to America, he became a Rebbe of Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe mentioned it a few times in the Sichos. That's when he became a Rebbe on Klal Yisrael. Who else do we find was a Melech on Klal Yisrael? Moshe Rabbeinu. He had all the Yidden with him in this Anan HaKaved. He was in the clouds. Everyone was together there. The whole Klal Yisrael. So he had Hashpah on everyone directly. Who else? Mordechai HaTzadik. Chanukah time. Matisyahu. There was only a certain select group that were in Eretz Yisrael. Many Yidden were in Bavel, were in other places. Who was how many Yidden were under them was a small group. But Mordechai Tzaddik was on all the Yidden, because the Gezerah Rachmana Litzlan of Haman HaRasha, of Achashverosh, was all the Yidden on the face of the globe. And Mordechai Tzaddik had Hashpah on all of them. And that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about now. Let's look inside. Siv Zayin. V'hine yedua shemesidas nefesh bepoil. Al teiru mitzvah shel kol Yisrael. Ha'yisa bepurim b'gezedas b'zman gezedas Haman. The Mesidas Nefesh that was influenced by Mordechai Tzaddik, influenced all the Yidden. And what was that? In the time of Gezedas Haman. Shamasidas Nefesh the Chanukah, because man Gezedas Yavan, I said Behika b'Matisyahu Vanav. It was only a small group, Matisyahu and his children. Shamasidas Nefesh Bizman Gezedas Haman, I said B'chol Yisrael. And like we mentioned earlier in the Maimer, that if they would only give up their religion, they wouldn't be killed. But it says not even one of them had a machshava to chas v'shalom to convert. They all stood b'mesidas nefesh during the entire time of the Gezerah. By the time of Matisyahu, unfortunately, we know there were Hellenistin and there were Yidden who weren't, whatever, they went different ways. Not all the Yidden went Mesidas Nefesh, except for Matisyahu Ubanov. Mela, from this is understood. Val Pizah Yesh Levair, Mashamuva Ba Maimer, Mimedrash. Now we can understand why when the Medrash wants to bring about Mordechai, he compares him to Moshe. 1 minute. In every generation, there's a Moshe. Spashtusa the Moshe, Choldara Vedara. So why is the Medrash saying Mordechai B'Doire, Moshe B'Doire? Why single out Mordechai? Because both of them had an influence on Kol Yisrael. It's not excluding that there weren't other Nesiim, Nesiya Yisrael, other Moshes and other generations who didn't have influence. David HaMelech had influence, the Stam on Kol Yisrael. There were other great tzaddikim. But why is he singling out Mordechai? Mordechai Hayashaka B'Doire K'Moshe B'Doire. Now again, she is Pashtusa the Moshe who B'Chol Doir. Even though Moshe is in every generation, we call Makemisa B'Medrash. Nevertheless, the Medrash says Mordechai Dafka Hayashaka B'Doire K'Moshe B'Doire. Dafka Mordechai was so like Moshe. Why? B'Yishleimar. Shema Mailis to Mordechai Ayudihu, Shuaya Raimem, the Begilui shall call Yisrael Shebedoidoi. Look how it's underlined, Begilui. Because Behelen, Bepnimius, every Rebbe, his first and primary function is on Kol Yisrael. That first primary function to get every Yid's Lamo'ir is Etzem HaNefesh, to give us a tresel, to awaken us up. Every single Moshe Rabbeinu accomplishes that. But in many generations was Behelim. That means that it wasn't Begolui on Kol Yisrael. That's what Rebbe is saying. Of Mordechai Yehudi he was Raimem Begilui shall call Yisrael Shebedoiroi. Because all Anshe Doiroi, all the people of his generation were ready to go on Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore the Medrash compares him to Moshe. B'dugmas Moshe, Ra'im Ehemne, She'im Shechdas L'chol Yisrael Shebedoiroi. He's the one who brought Das to all the people in his generation. That means he was a Rebbe, I'll call Yisrael. There weren't any Yidden living somewhere else. The Rebbe brings a Raya. Kamuvin Gami says, Shedoire Shel Moshe, Kol Anshe Doire, Nikra Doideya. The whole generation of Moshe is called a Doideya. He was Matzliach to bring Das to them. The only thing is that by Moshe, that was a secondary thing. That means the eager thing of a Rebbe. Let's look inside. This Gilui of this Inyan by Moshe. Shuhurayim the Chol Yisrael. Ayidei Shem Shechdas. The Chol Anshe Doiroi. Moshe Rabbeinu's Pa'ula, that he was Mamshech Das and Elokus. This was not because they were able to do themselves. They reached their Deya because Moshe Rabbeinu piled it by them. But Mordechai Aya, Gilo Inyan Zeh, Ayidei Shegila Koyach HaMesiras Nefesh B'chol Anchi Shei Doiroi. The Inyan of being a Raya Mehemna L'chol Yisrael. By Moshe was in one way, and by Mordechai was in a different way. Moshe is through Inyan of Das, Deya, and by Mordechai was a different way. It was through bringing Mesiras Nefesh. What does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu Himshech Das? What is his Das all about? So one of the explanations is that what's a Chassidische Verbringen? Chassidische Verbringen is to internalize certain things that those who are attending the Verbringen should take the things internally, to start living by it. Not that it should be a chitzonistic knowledge, but it should be something very, very pneumistic. For example, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would come to someone in the times of Moshe and pluck a Yid out of the clouds of Moshe and settle him down in Italy or somewhere else and say, I want you to stay a good Yid where you are. And I would say, sure, of course. I'm ready. Are you sure? Yeah, we'll have Gilui Elikus. No. In Italy, there's no Gilui Elikus. You have to be in the clouds. So where is your Yiddishkeit up to? Are you a Yid just because you're in such a halakha surrounding? Are you a Yid just because of a chitzonistic thing? That everything around you, you're drinking Veda Shal Miriam, you're eating the man, you have all these chitzonistic things. Or are you a Yid because you internalize it? It became your etzem. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu did. When Moshe Rabbeinu had many, many verbringens with the Yidden, spoke to them a lot. To what? To internalize all the Yiddishkeit, the Torah and the mitzvahs should become their etzem. Not something that only the surrounding, and surrounding does affect anyone. There's a Maisa, someone once, the Rebbe told this, I don't remember with whom, that a chassid said, to sit in Lubavitch and be a chassid is not a kunz. You know what's a kunz? To live in Peterburg. Over there to be a Frumi Yid. But that's also nishkin kunz. You know what a real kunz is? To go to a theater and keep your eyes closed. That's also not a kunz. A kunz is to get a front seat and keep your eyes closed. So I heard the Maisa, I remember the Rebbe mentioning something to it, but what was the answer to the chassid? Hashem is not asking us to be a kunzenmacher. He's not asking for kunzen. Don't go to a place that brings you to Nisayan. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo yhalach batzas v'shoim u'v'derech hatoim lo yamad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yoshav. David HaMelech is telling us, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo yhalach, walked, lo yamad, stood, lo yoshav, sit. What is David HaMelech saying? Yetzer hara doesn't come to the person and tell him, Lech avoid avodah zara. Yetzer hara knows that's not going to happen. So what does he do? He comes to the person, Hayomer Maloikach, Machai Maloikach. Today he says like this, tomorrow he says, so today he says, Holach, walk by the Tetzaveh restaurant. You're not going in, Chas Shalom, but walk by. The second time, so once he gets the person to do that, he says, next step, Ahmad. You're allowed to stand there. Is anywhere in Shulchan Aruch you're not allowed to stand in front of a tray for restaurant? Stand there. And then once he gets the person to do that, comes Yashav. Is there anything wrong sitting down in a restaurant? Vu steht in Shulchan Aruch or in any posik that says he becomes a London. Like they say, Paskin says, where does it say you're not allowed to sit in a tray for a restaurant? And you're not allowed to order a sandwich? You're only ordering it, not eating it. And I'll say step by step until when he comes so close to the cliff, what does he do? He gives you a push. That's why David HaMelech says, Ashrei ish ashrei holach. Not only lo yoshav, lo yamad. Don't even go for the first step. And the Rebbe, I think more than once, gave a taich. What does it mean? Yetzirah says, "Hayem ermelikach, umacha ermelikach." What is this kach about? It's very interesting. The Rebbe said sometimes the Yetzirah comes and says, "Yeah. You have to daven kach to asay." It makes sense. Yeah, makes sense to daven, to express your feelings to Hashem. And Yetzirah becomes like a partner in your action. Says, yeah, I'm participating. What's the problem with it? The problem is he's trying to make it into a tam vadas. He's trying to tell you how much it makes sense. Then when it comes to a mitzvah, which is sort of a chayk, or something which is more difficult, he's, this doesn't make sense already. I agreed with you the other things, but das nicht. We have to keep him out of the door. Avec. So that is what Moshe Rabbeinu did in his generation, brought das ve'elokus, that the Torah and the mitzvahs, everything became internalized. It became part of them, inseparable. That's why they can go on shlichus and not get affected. I remember when I was summertime as a balcher, we went on America's shlichus. That's what it was called, America's in Yonah Chinuch. We went on shlichus for the Rebbe. We went to different places. So one of the places we visited was Rockland County, and we came to Muncie. That's where I think we were sleeping. But we went to mishpachas over there to be makar of them. And the son of the Vishnitzer Rebbe then, back in the 1970s, came to one of the shuls that we went to, and he was talking to us. And he says, I want to tell you something. And I'm almost sure he said in the name of his father. He says, the reason why we don't send shluchim, he says about the Vishnitzer, because our Rebbe does not give us the koyach to be able to do it. Your Rebbe gives the koyach for the shluchim to go out there and do their shlichus. That's why you're able to do it. We're able to go out. The Rebbe is mamshech deya be'elukus, das, to us, becomes internalized. But soon, the Rebbe is going to tell us a very important thing, and this is in the third part of the Maimer, to explain the Yikho Elecha. That in order that a Rebbe should be able to do his function, there is necessary that the Yikho Elecha, the Yidden have to contribute their part. This has to be in partnership. It can't be a one-way street. The Yidden have to be connected. That's Haben is kashrus. And the Rebbe is going to explain it in the third part of the Maimer, beginning Siftes. Now the Rebbe concludes this Seif Zayin, with a remarkable statement, which is about the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Mela also about himself. Yes, Shloimar, Vayidei, Shemevi Ba Maimer Masha Kosa B'Medrash, Shemor Dechai B'Doiroi, Hayushakol Kamesha B'Doiroi, by the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in his Maimer, the Maimer HaMedrash, the Mordechai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his generation, because he was pile on Kol Yisrael begilui aydeze pasak bala maimer esadin al atzmai. That's how he's posik the din about himself, about the Frierdiker Rebbe. Shu aray mehemne begilui shel kol anshei adar. That he is the Rai Mehemna also begilui for the whole Anshe Adar, all the Yidden of his generation. What does it mean, Pasuk Alatzmai? What's this lashon? So the Rebbe brings it a lot of times. It's from the Baal Shem Tov. It's a very important lesson in Avos Yisrael. It says in the Mishnah, Nifroin min ha'adam midaitoi v'shaloi midaitoi. That a person, they make a cheshbon with this person, midaitoi, with his knowledge, they get his consent, and then they do it without his consent. What does this mean? Is it with or without? So Baal Shem Tov explains what does midaitoi mean. That when it comes to Best in Shalmaila, and they have to give a certain consequence for a certain behavior that a person did, so what do they do? So the first thing is what the Baal Shem Tov says like this. They come to this person in advance, before they're going to make the psaktim on him. And they say, if this and this guy did so-and-so, let's say, it says, if Reuven did such and a very lashon hara, or he ate something he shouldn't eat, what is psak din for this person? What's the din? And they're going to record the words that he's going to answer. If he's malamet schus on the guy, then they write it down. If he's going to say chas v'shalom, a harsh word, a harsh verdict, they're going to write it down. Then later, if he violates that particular aveda, they don't even have to do anything. They go ahead and they just give him that thing, that result, that consequence. That's like midaitoi v'shaloi midaitoi. Midaitoi is about somebody else. Shaloi midaitoi is when it's asking about himself. So if they saw that when they asked him about plaintiff and plaintiff, he says, "Oh, I have rechmanis on him. He didn't realize, he doesn't know how serious it is." Then they'll do that for him, because he paskin so on another yid. And this is how the Mishnah, it says, "Lifnei mi'ata asid litain din v'cheshbon." There's a pasuk in Pirkei Avos, it says, you have to take in consideration, to whom are you going to give it, din v'cheshbon? What does it mean, din v'cheshbon? First you make the cheshbon, then comes the total, and then you give him the psak din. The din should come after the cheshbon. So the pshat is azai. First they ask you what's the din about Reuven, and then they make the cheshbon with the person who made that din. Says the Rebbe, if this is so, mida purani eyes, halachas kama v'kama, meruba mida taiva, mida purani eyes. Now let's say someone says to you, "Oh, that gevir, he gave only $1 for tzedakah." You say, you don't know what he's going through. And, maybe for him giving $1 was a big thing, and Hashem should pay him back, 1,000,000 times as much. They're going to write that down, that in case one day this guy gives less than he should be giving, they're going to take that psak din, and they're going to do with him, they're going to give him 1,000,000 times as much. That's why we have to should train our tongue to talk good all the time. And not only b'dibur, our thoughts too, because the Eibishter, Hashem Yireh Lalevav. We should judge everyone with a good eye. We see someone in shul or on the street, or a neighbor or a relative that's doing something that you think should be different. Judge the person favorably in your mind, and Hashem will judge us that way too, favorably. Have you done his kol in the kafskos? Am I not working on certain midas for 30 years and I still can't get myself to take care of that? 30 years. Maybe this guy did accomplish that. Maybe he did. Out of 10 nisyonos, he was able to accomplish 9. The 10th one was too hard for him. And what's about me? We should always be malamet zchus on everyone and look at everyone with a good eye. All right, we have to continue. Chab noch was zu sagen, but everything is understood, hopefully. Now we're up to Sif Ches. Now the Rebbe is going to summarize, so to speak, the mimer to what we learned and come to a summary and to a conclusion. And this will conclude part 2 of the mimer. And then comes part 3 about V'yikra Lacha. And to answer some great shilas, big klutz kashas that we're going to get to soon. Valpi zeyesh levayer kesher. The seder inyan ba maimer be'er apostle about Tetzaveh goymer. Now we can understand the kesher and the seder of the inyanim of the maimer. Basically, this maimer is teaching the pasuk. Ve'atet Tetzaveh is bnei Yisrael. Then it says Kosis Lamoyer. We want to know what's the pshat. So he's saying like this: Shebetchila mevayeres hapirush devatet Tetzaveh is bnei Yisrael. Very first thing that Rebbe is telling us, what's the type of Ve'atet Tetzaveh is bnei Yisrael, that we're explaining the pasuk. It's not referring to the physical oil. It's talking about the function of a Rebbe. Moshe Rabbeinu on his died, and every Rebbe, every Moshe in their died. To be Shemoshe hu mekasher or mechaber as bnei Yisrael im oid ein sof. That the Eibishter is the one who's mekasher all the Yidden with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How? Aidei shehu zan u'mefarnes es ha'emunah. Before we learned in the beginning of the Maimer, we didn't specify. Now the Rebbe is specifying again what he said in Perek Vav, as Emunah. He's feeding the Emunah itself from Yechida to Chaya. That means the Hamshacha of Emunah B'Pnimius has to come from Ma'ir, because if it came only from Chaya, you can have the Emunah, but a person can be still stealing. In order to come to Pnimius, we need to have from Chaya, from Yechida, from the Ma'ir. So here, L'cha'ira, you can ask a simple shaila. Why doesn't the Rebbe, when he's learning the Maimer, he explains right away the words Kosis Lamoyer. La'achrei zeh, mevayer shegam rei Yisrael shebechol doer, is Pashlus the Moshe, mechaz k'meseh di Yisrael, every Moshe, every rei Yisrael. This Pashlus HaMeiv in every generation, they're mechazik the emunah the Yisrael, k'mei Mordechai. Moshe shebedoirei shechizek semunasam shel Yisrael lamed chazak b'limud ha'Torah v'kiyum ha'mitzvos. What is the function of Moshe, Mordechai, and every Moshe mechazik, to be mechazik the Yidden in their emunah? Ula'achli zeh mevayed ha'perish b'kosis lamoed shebepasuk ve'atet Tetzaveh shemidaber l'chayre b'Moshe atzmei. L'chayre, because kosis lamoed is talking to Moshe. Who's Eibush saying? Ve'atet Tetzaveh is bnei Yisrael. So what does it mean? Moshe didn't have kosis. It's referring be'iker to kosis lamoed, to those generations where there was a Moshe who needed to awaken Yechidish B'Nefesh, Mesidus Nefesh, like Mordechai HaTzadik. Ki zeh sheMoshe megala b'chinas hamoyer di Yisrael etzem neshama ube'iker al yedei hispashlusa delay shebizman hagalus costs she'oireru b'Yisrael koyach Mesidus Nefesh alahem shal yedei zeh u'ikur gilei etzem neshama hamoyer. It comes out from here. Mordechai HaTzadik had some superiority, some advantage over Moshe. Nicht den Ganzen. It's not like black and white. Moshe Rabbeinu did affect Ma'ir, but that was like I said, we learned earlier, every Rebbe does that. Works with Ma'ir. But what's Begilui? What comes down more Begilui? Moshe Rabbeinu was more Da'as in Elokus. What was by Mordechai Tzaddik? Sidus Nefesh. So where did you see more Gilui of Kosis of Lama'ir? Where do you see Lama'ir more Begilui? In the time of Kosis. That's what he's saying. That's for the Ispashtus of the Moshe, not Moshe himself. The Ispashtus of Zman HaGolos, in the time of Kosis, these kind of Rebbes, the Mordechai in his time, the Frierdiker Rebbe in his time, that was Megala Iker Gilui Etzem Anashama Ma'ir. So here, basically, we finished the Iker of the second part of the Maimer, but to introduce and to go to the next part of the Maimer, the Rebbe asks a Shaila. Shaila is the pasuk, according to everything we learned, Ve'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael. You should connect Yidden to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How? Through the Ma'ir. When do we get Ma'ir? Kosis LaMa'ir. So according to this Maimed, the pasuk should say Ve'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael, Kosis LaMa'ir. But it doesn't say so. What does it say? Ve'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael, Ve'yikroi lecha Shemen Zayizach. Huh? Whose function are we talking about now? Talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, a Moshe of every generation. So finish the whole thing. V'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael and Kosis LaMa'ir. Then you could say, V'yikroi lecha Shemen Zayizach. Talk about the function of Yidden. V'yikru is referring to the function of Yidden. We're not talking about the Yidden now. Talking about Ve'ata, Moshe Rabbeinu. What's your function? So it should have said Ve'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael, then say Kosis LaMa'ir. But in the pasuk, if we take a look, we see that Kosis LaMa'ir comes only after the words V'yikru lecha. So whose function are we talking about? And that's what the Rebbe is going to say. Exactly so. Moshe Rabbeinu's tafkid is to connect us with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in order for him to do that, he needs your partnership. He needs you to do your part. You also have to do something. If I'm only going to sit back and expect it to happen just because I have Moshe Rabbeinu, says the pasuk, no, then you can have LaMa'ir. Or if necessary in those generations, Kosis LaMa'ir. Let's look inside. According to the explanation of the Maimon until now, in the Kosis LaMa'ir, Shaykh Levat Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael. What is Kosis LaMa'ir? That's part of the function of Moshe and every Moshe to do Tetzaveh, connect as Bnei Yisrael. The fact that Moshe and his Pashtus in every generation, as Yisrael and Saif, that they connect Yidden with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Well, look in the pasuk. V'kosov ne'emar Kosis LaMa'ir. When does the pasuk say Kosis LaMa'ir? Behemshech leV'yikroi lecha Shemen Zayizach. It comes only as a hemshech, a continuation after it mentions the Yidden's tafkid, the Yidden's responsibility of V'yikru. The Inyan V'yikroi lecha Geimer sheYisrael Mevim Shemen LaMoshe. Yidden are the one who brings the oil to Moshe. What's the pshat? What do they bring to Moshe? Who she Yisrael Meisifim Tois or ben Moshe vor leil sif base my maimet. It's explained in sif base. We said that asher anoichim bekirboy, that we can help Moshe get a higher madrega in him, right? How v'yikhoylacha. But how does it fit in with the pasuk now? Who are we talking about? Why don't we just say the Tetzaveh Bnei Israel and then Kosas Lamar and finish talking about Moshe's responsibility and then go over to the Yidden's responsibility? Doesn't go like that. Right in smack in the middle, puts him b'yikhoylacha. To understand this, we have to go to the third part of the Maimed. Right? Call it third part of the Maimed. It's really like another Maimed, a new Maimed. It's another approach where the Rebbe is going to ask a klotz kasha. And this is going to translate into Avodah of Bnei Yisrael, dafka in our generation, more than every other generation. What's the klotz kasha? I think I did mention it earlier. The whole Maimah of the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about the Kibbul HaYehudim. Kimu Mashe Kiblu Tkvar, the Kibbul HaYehudim Mashe Chelu Lasois. Gewaltige Zach, that they were able to accomplish such a great thing that they were able to do more than what the Yidden did by Matan Torah. Question is a simple question. When did V'kibel HaYehudim happen? When was Kimu Mashe Kiblu Kvar? Time of Mordechai. There were two times of Mordechai. There was during the Gezerah, and there was a time after the Gezerah. Take a look in the Psukim. Where is it written? Only after the Gezerah, after Haman was hung, and after the Yidden Mordechai wrote his letters, and already they were puttered from all the enemies. And then it says, V'kibel HaYehudim. It says, Sherechilu La'asais. Kimu V'kiblu. Those already good times. Why did they need Kibul HaYehudim then? You know where Kibul HaYehudim should be written? During the Gezerah. And that's the whole justification why Dafka the Yidden, B'shas Mordechai's times, B'shas the Gezerah, they sealed Matan Torah because they had Mesidas Nefesh, and that's the Taich Kimu Mashe Kibul Kvar. But it's written after, not during the Gezerah. So you could say that it's telling you that then, during the Gezerah, was a Kimu V'kiblu. But the Rebbe in the third part is going to explain, no. It's not mutually exclusive. The Psukim refer to two periods. It's written for the period after the Gezerah was battled, in the good times of Mordechai, but it also took place during the Gezerah. So there were two times. 1 minute. What do you mean two times? Why do we need it the second time? What kind of Kimu V'kiblu took place when the Yidden had a good time already? And that Yitz Hashem will learn in the next part of the Maimer, as is Hashem Yisbarech. Let's hope that before then we'll hear from the Rebbe, Mipi Atzmai, we'll hear him teach us Torah Chadasha Me'iti Tetzaveh. We'll hear the Maimer from the Rebbe himself, from Mipiv Shal Mashiach, Koriv Mamash. A guten Shabbos, a gut gebenchte Chodesh of Nisan, mit Nisan Nigalu, will be Nisan Asidl Negoel, or it's already after we said L'chun Ranana this morning in Shishal Yom, so it's already connected to Shabbos, which is Erev Rish Chodesh. We can have the Geula now, won't have any kashas. We should have only the best teretz, is the Geula Mitzvah Shlema Koriv Mamash. Yashar Koyach.